The wind moved. Through the trees in slow heavy waves, carrying with it the scent of leaves that had just begun to fall. Emily walked down the cracked road, her books pressed tightly against her chest. The town was quiet, the kind of quiet that pressed on your ears until every sound felt louder than it should. Her shoes tapped against the pavement, but even that seemed to echo too long. She had walked this path many times before, yet tonight it felt different. The air was colder, the shadows longer, and the silence heavier. Her gaze drifted to the old church on the hill. Its paint was peeling, its windows were dark, its bell tower leaned as though it had grown tired of standing, but even in its ruin it carried a kind of presence that demanded attention. Emily slowed her steps without meaning to. Her heart pulled in two directions, one telling her to keep walking, and the other whispering that she had to look closer. She finally let her eyes rest on the church steps and froze. An old man sat there, his posture tall, his face hidden beneath the shadow of a wide hat. He was perfectly still, as though carved from the same wood as the chair beneath him, yet his presence was sharp, undeniable. He did not look at her, but she felt seen anyway, in a way that made her chest tighten. The last rays of sun slid across his figure, and for a moment the scene felt painted instead of real. Emily held her breath, unsure if she should run or speak. The silence stretched heavy and endless, and then the man slowly lifted his head. The old man lifted his head, and Emily finally saw his eyes. They were pale, almost silver, but filled with something deep, something that felt like a memory too heavy to carry. He did not smile. He did not frown. He only studied her the way a storm studies the horizon before breaking. Emily stood frozen, every thought in her mind running wild, but her body rooted to the ground. The man finally spoke, his voice low and steady like a river moving under ice. "You should not be out here alone." The words sank into her chest, colder than the air around her. "I was just walking home," Emily managed to say, though her voice shook more than she wanted it to. The man tilted his head slightly as if weighing her answer, then he lifted one hand, pointing not at her, but at the woods behind the church. The trees there seemed darker than the rest, their branches knotted together so thick that no light slipped through. "Something waits there," he said, "not cruel, not kind, simply true." Emily felt her stomach turn. She wanted to ask what he meant, but before she could, he rose to his feet. His frame was tall and strong despite his age, his coat brushing the ground as he stepped closer. The sound of his boots on the wooden steps echoed across the empty street. Each step felt like a question pressing against her chest. Emily tightened her grip on her books. He stopped only a few feet away, his silver eyes fixed on her. "Do not fear me, child," he said quietly. "Fear the ones who follow after." Before she could respond, the church bell above them gave a single low groan, though no hand had touched it. The sound rolled through the town like a warning. Emily turned her eyes to the tower, but when she looked back, the old man was gone. The steps were empty, only the faint outline of his shadow lingered, and even that faded as the last light of day disappeared. Emily stood there alone, her breath loud in her ears. She whispered to herself without even knowing why, "I should have never stopped walking." Emily forced her feet to move, though each step felt heavier than the last. The street stretched long and empty, the lamps flickering with a weak glow. She kept her eyes fixed ahead, but the echo of that single bell clung to her ears. She told herself it was only the wind, only old wood shifting. Yet the words of the man pressed against her mind. "Fear the ones who follow after." By the time she reached her porch, the night had deepened. The small house stood quiet, the windows dark. She reached for the door, her hands trembling, but then she stopped. She felt it. Not sound, not sight, but something else. A weight in the air, a pressure behind her. She turned slowly. Across the dirt road near the fence line stood three figures, their shapes blurred by distance, but still clear enough to see they were not moving, not even swaying. They simply stood watching. Her breath caught in her throat. She wanted to call out, but her voice failed her. The horse that usually grazed near the barn shifted uneasily, stamping the ground. As if it too sensed the wrongness, Emily stumbled inside, shutting the door hard. Her chest heaved as she pressed her back against the wood. She told herself she imagined them, yet when she peeked through the curtain her eyes met the same still figures closer now. The night outside seemed to hold its breath, waiting. She hurried to light the small lantern on the table, its glow spilling across the room. The warmth steadied her for a moment, but then a soft sound crept through the cracks of the door. Not a knock, not footsteps, something like a whisper, rising and falling as if the very wind had learned to speak. She pressed her hands over her ears. Still the sound curled inside her skull, carrying words she could not understand. The lantern flame flickered hard, almost dying out. She clutched it tight, whispering to herself over and over, "You are dreaming, you are dreaming." But the sound did not stop. The house felt smaller, the walls pressing closer, and outside she knew the figures had not left. They were waiting. Emily could not sleep that night. She sat in the chair near the door, the lantern burning low, her hands gripping its base as though the small light was the only thread holding her in place. The whispers outside rose and fell like a tide, always just beyond her hearing. The figures did not move, but she felt their eyes pressed against the walls of her home like cold hands reaching through the cracks. Hours dragged until the first weak grey of dawn bled into the horizon. Emily thought the daylight might banish them. She dared to look again through the curtain. The road was empty, the fence line bare. No footprints in the dust, only the stillness of morning. She let out a shaking breath, telling herself she had imagined it. Yet deep down she knew she had not. The next day she tried to return to normal. She chopped wood, she hauled water. She fed the animals, but her hands shook with every task, and her eyes never stopped scanning the tree line. The barn creaked, and she dropped the bucket as if struck, her nerves frayed like rope pulled too long. By late afternoon she thought she saw movement again, a flicker in the shadows. Near the edge of the wood she held herself still, watching the branches swayed, but no wind touched her face. The silence stretched, and then the flicker was gone. Still her heart would not calm. When night came, Emily did not light the lantern immediately. She wanted to believe nothing waited for her outside. Yet as the darkness settled, the whispers returned, soft at first, then growing louder like breath on glass. She pressed her hands against her ears again, but this time she heard words clear enough to chill her. They called her name, drawn out, slow, Emily. Her body froze. The sound came from every side of the house at once. The walls seemed alive with voices. She backed into the corner, her breath shallow, eyes wide. The lantern finally sparked to life when she struck a match, and the voices quieted but did not vanish. They hovered just beyond the light, waiting for her to falter. Emily sat through the night. Awake and trembling, she felt the weight of being hunted, and though she had no proof, she knew this was only the beginning. The man in the street had not lied. The ones who follow after had found her. The following morning, Emily felt like a stranger in her own home. The sun poured through the windows, but the warmth no longer touched her. She moved through the rooms, slowly, her eyes drawn again and again to the door, as if expecting someone to knock. She told herself she could leave, go back to town, abandon this place, but each time the thought came a stronger one. Followed, if she left now, whatever followed her might come too. She decided to walk the land to convince herself she was safe. She carried the lantern, though it was broad daylight, as if its glass flame could shield her. She circled the barn, then the fence line. Her boots left prints in the dust, but there were no others, only hers, and yet the silence of the trees pressed close. Every creak of wood or call of a crow set her on edge. At the far edge of her land she stopped. She felt it before she saw it. The air was heavy and still, as if the world itself held its breath. And then between the trees she saw them, not fully shapes, not fully shadows, but figures, pale and long, standing just at the limit of sight. They did not move. They only leaned forward like watchers at a window. Her mouth went dry. She blinked and they were gone. Emily stumbled back to the house, slamming the door and locking it, though she knew locks meant nothing. Against what followed, she tried to distract herself with chores, boiling water, patching a torn shirt, but every few moments her eyes slid to the door. She waited for another whisper, another call of her name. That night she tried a different tactic. She lit every lantern in the house until the place glowed. Like a beacon she whispered prayers she had not spoken since childhood and begged whatever waited outside to leave her be. 4 hours nothing happened, and her hope began to rise, but just as she drifted near sleep, a shadow passed across the window. A long hand stretched along the glass pane, and thin the voices rose again, this time not soft but urgent. Emily, Emily. Her courage snapped. She shouted into the darkness, telling them to leave her, to leave this place. The voices fell silent. Her heart hammered. She thought perhaps she had broken whatever hold they had, but when she turned the lantern toward the far wall, she saw it, a mark carved deep into the wood, a circle with lines twisting through it, a symbol she did not understand, but knew meant only one thing. They had already come inside. Emily froze, staring at the mark on the wall. The lantern trembled in her hand, casting jagged light across the board. She stepped closer to touch it and found the wood cold as stone, colder than the night air outside. Her breath caught in her throat. This was no accident. Someone or something had carved it from within her home. She backed away, and every sound in the house seemed louder: the ticking of the clock, the groan of the beams, the faint scrape of wind against the shutters. Each noise folded into the same thought. She was not alone here. Emily gathered her courage and climbed the narrow stairs to the attic, a place she had avoided since she moved in. The lantern's glow revealed dust curling in the air and broken furniture covered in sheets, but in the far corner something gleamed, a small box set neatly as if waiting for her. She hesitated, but her hand moved on its own. She opened it, and inside were faded photographs of family. She did not recognize faces, pale with wide sorrowful eyes behind them. In every picture was the same circle symbol carved into the walls. The voices rose again, this time all around her, filling the attic until she pressed her hands to her ears. They called her name, not as a stranger, but as if they had always known her. Emily, Emily, you belong with us. Her pulse thundered. She dropped the box, the photos scattering like fallen leaves, and fled down the stairs. The house groaned with her every step. Doors rattled, windows shook as if the whole place tried to keep her from leaving. She grabbed her coat and lantern, ready to escape into the night. But when she opened the door, the figures were waiting, not far in the trees anymore, but at the threshold. Their forms clearer now, faces stretched, eyes hollow and endless. They whispered together, one voice made of many, come home, Emily, come home. Emily's hands trembled on the doorknob. The figures outside swayed like shadows, but their whispers grew sharper, drawing her name over and over. She wanted to scream, to run, but her feet would not move. It was as though the ground itself held her in place. Then something shifted. One of the figures stepped forward, and she saw its face. It was her own, a reflection of her, but drained, pale and empty. Its lips curved into a smile that chilled her blood. She stumbled back, shaking her head, but every shadow followed until the house itself seemed alive. The walls bent inward, the air thickened, and she realized the truth. The house had not been haunted, it had been waiting. The circle carved into the wood, the voices in the dark, the photographs in the attic, they all pointed to one thing: she was not just living in this house, she was part of it. Now the figures reached out their arms, and the door slammed shut, sealing her fate. The lantern fell from her hand, and darkness swallowed the room, but before it went out completely, she saw the circle glow faintly on the floor beneath her feet. Her breath caught, and the voices spoke in unison, welcome home. The screen fades to black, leaving only silence. If you felt the chill in Emily's story and want to uncover more tales that stay with you long after the video ends, then don't leave without hitting subscribe. This is only the beginning, and the next story might just be the one that finds you.